Two Davids Walk Into a Bar is filmed in front of a live studio audience.
Marty, shh, you'll scare the fish.
But we're missing the big football game.
Relax, my VHS home video recorder is taping it right now.
High five for death and alive. Bring the plastic like a man from a casket. High five for death and alive. Bring the plastic like a man from a casket.
Hello, this is Two Davids Walk Into a Bar. I'm here with David Lawler. How you doing?
I'm all right. How are you?
I am great. This is something that you brought up that I'm very enthusiastic about, and I just wish I had thought of it. And we're doing almost like a history of like video, how it started, who did it, who did what, when.
Right. Video rentals,
and companies.
All the movies in the beginnings and the origin, and really just going back to those nostalgic roots where everything was better when you were younger.
Yeah,
like that.
It was. I miss those days.
It seems that we're just like kind of like as media progresses, technology advances, just sort of chasing after those old days of when it started, which was, I guess, probably the late 70s, right?
Late 70s. For us, it was a little later. I think you said, what year did it start for you? When did you get your first VCR?
My first VCR, it was an RCA 2-head VHS, and we bought it, I believe, at the end of 1985 or the beginning of 1986.
Yeah, and for me, it was, I mean, by then I was a seasoned veteran in video and everything by then, and we're around the same age, so I guess it hit me a little earlier. We got a Zenith Beta VCR in late 1980. It was made by Sony, so it looked very Sony-esque, except it looked also very Zenith-esque. It had the nice sort of padded front, and it said Zenith on it. And every time I think about it, I think of like that guy in Gremlins, when he's like, the Gremlins are messing with his TV, and he's like, "I told you we should have bought a Zenith." You know, there used to be almost like mom and pop electronic stores.
That's true.
And even though we're almost in the last days of like a Circuit City or a Best Buy or a Fry's or whatever, at the time it was mostly little sort of like, you know, I can't even remember the name, but I think it was called Lynch's Electronics, and it was like on the corner, and you'd go in and it would be like a few TVs and a few VCRs. And
yes.
I'm gonna guess the salesman said, "Yeah, Beta's better, and this is why, and you can get this and do this." And at the time when you rented movies, it, you know, formats, schmormats, they both worked. Beta at the time did give you a better picture. VHS would of course work on that. And you could go down to your local video store, which wasn't very local at this time. There was just a smattering of them. And for us, you would go down, I'm going to say about maybe 5 miles. Not super far away, but not super close either. You go down and there'd be this video store, and they'd have VHS and Beta, which not a huge selection because there are only a few companies. And I think that leads us into our conversation about the first company that we're going to talk about.
First, we're starting with the first actual format, and you know, it's not really going to be the subject of our show.
No,
but it is the beginning, and what it was somebody put it in their head. Finally, they had this idea in the 70s, the early 70s, I think. Hey, people might actually want to rent movies and show them at home. Go home and watch a movie, and wouldn't it be so convenient? It'd be awesome. And back then, it was kind of like magic, really, when you thought about it. And so this gentleman named Frank Stanton, who worked for CTI Avco, developed a system called Cartridgevision, which was a video cartridge, and it resembled like an 8-track tape. Mm-hmm. And what you did was you rented it, and I think it cost a bit of money, maybe $5 to $7 for a title,
which was a lot of money then. It was, I mean, if you're in the early 70s, we're talking like $20-$30.
Yes,
for one movie,
equivalent adjusted dollars, and you couldn't rewind it. It was so strange. It was like this. It was kind of like a combination of what maybe the younger generations will remember DivX, or they'll remember Netflix, how it started.
Yeah.
It was a mail order rental process, and you rented this movie, you played it once, you couldn't rewind it. The store never put a rewind function on it, just just so I guess
Yeah.
I don't know what.
And
what
it was
the issue
made it was like some sort of weird kind of like, and people know this, like when you have the tape and you can pop the tab out, it had that sort of plastic, weird sort of mechanical thing in it where it couldn't be rewound or moved or anything. It was like I think I saw one of those tapes once of like, it's got this weird sort of shape and in like plastic pieces in weird places.
Right.
Also, like the technological marvel of it was, I think it functioned very much like at the time, like a 3/4 inch kind of machine. But in order to get the time on the thing like good, they had to do like they did with extended play. They would do with extended play later, but they would actually have it work.
Yeah.
So the
yeah.
picture would be very wobbly.
Yes,
like
it did not look that great.
It didn't look that
I
great.
mean, like, it's a movie that you can take home and play back on your television.
Once.
So that yeah, but so it was like people were like, "Oh my God, this is like," obviously people saw it as the wave of the future.
It came in a like contained in a thing that was with a TV too. It's like so much like the first Sony Betamax, and you had to like buy a console TV to watch a tape. You couldn't just have like a
Right.
separate excuse me. You couldn't just have a separate VCR that you could just put on any TV. Oh no. You had to
Yeah.
buy a TV, and it was like a Montgomery Ward's or a Sears or some big
Yeah.
console.
They were the ones who sold
monstrosity.
it. It was an enormous thing.
Yeah, and I'm
like
gonna
a
guess you
big piece
you
of
got the
furniture.
tapes through whatever like store you bought it from,
Yes.
and then I'm gonna guess you would through mail order. You would get a tape. You would watch your movie once, and then you would send it back, and that was it. And I don't even think was there a pause? Was there a?
I think there might have been a stop, but
Okay.
not a pause. No
I
pause.
know that there was another feature though, and this was sort of revolutionary. It had a camera, and you could get blank tapes.
Yeah, you could.
And
You
it was
could.
kind of like the early camcorder, but you'd have to hook it up to the TV. So you'd basically just have to record your family in the living room doing whatever. You couldn't take it with you. You couldn't take the whole TV with you.
Yeah.
So, so you could record something in very wobbly picture. I guess it was color, and it would work. And that it failed very quickly because there just
Yeah.
wasn't enough companies and there wasn't enough capital. I mean, heck,
It was I would consider Cartrovision to be kind of like an experiment, just to see if there people would be interested. People were interested. It's just that it was the machines cost too much money, the quality of the playback, and then for some reason they stored their tape stock in a really like bad place with terrible like humidity and stuff like that. So
Yes.
all of their tape stock was destroyed. It's very hard to find any existing.
Yeah, I mean the
Tapes.
the thing that we found on YouTube, sort of the demonstration tape, somehow that survived, and they had to get like a working Cartrovision machine to get it to work. And what they did was, like, when the company failed, they took the sort of the guts of the machine, and like people were sort of repurposing them so you could have a separate Cartrovision thing if you wanted. But by this time, there were different formats coming out. Like there was a bunch of experiments. I mean, you had the 3/4 inch U-matic, which eventually would be successful in sort of the sort of industrial purposes.
Yeah.
But then,
U-matic was still being used up until maybe the first decade of the 2000s.
But they didn't release movies on that, I don't think, because it was a 1 hour format, and that was kind of what crippled Beta, because again, you couldn't get a whole movie on there. You could just record 1 hour. And so but when VHS came out, you could record 2 hours on a tape at first.
If I'm not mistaken, I think U-matic was the first to use that helical scan format, which was being used as soon as we got into helical scan. That led to Beta, and then led to VHS, and then led even as far as what was it? DAT tape. DAT tape used a helical scanner too.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a pretty, I mean, whoever came up with the idea of the helical scan must.
Well,
be
they probably just looked at, because like the way
multi-millionaire
that they made tapes at the time, it was a very sort of brute force, almost like the way audio tapes are recorded, where it's just the head on the tape and that's it.
Yeah.
And then they realized, wait a minute, if we take the head and we put it on a drum, we can move the head instead of moving the tape.
Yeah.
And if the head's moving around, you can. And then I think that they kind of like figured out moving the head around and then doing it in an angle, like, saved so much space on the tape.
Yeah.
that they could like, wait a minute, we can get up to an hour on these things. And then it became 2 hours because the tapes got bigger. And then, but like the tape shrank, but then got bigger because like they shrank to beta, but then like VHS was like, wait a minute, if we make the speed a little bit slower and we make the tape a little bit longer and we make the tape a little bit bigger, I think we can get 2 hours on a tape. And that's what people will want. But I still don't think that they thought of the, like, wait a minute, we can put pre-recorded movies on. Like, it was like this evolution of, like, what can we do? They didn't really know what they had.
It was like so many good ideas coming together.
And there were there were other companies coming out. Like there was a Sanyo V-Cord. There was a Panasonic something that was sort of similar to V-Cord, where like that was where like the head didn't move, and it was like some sort of weird stationary thing where the head was like in the middle of the recorder, and I had the tape was like this weird thing. There was a Philips system which ended up not coming here, but through Europe. It was called the Video 2000, where you could get, and it was very much like a video cassette, audio cassette, where you could flip it over and like you could like 4 hours one side, 4 hours the other. But I think it used very similar to VHS beta. Like ways of recording.
And then you had your discs, you had your CEDs, and
you had your CD. But that was much later. That was like an RCA
system. You had your CEDs, you had your UHD, and you had your Laserdisc.
No, VHD. VHD. That's what you're thinking of. No, it's called VHD.
VHD, right?
Video high density.
High density. And
it was kind of a good sort of compromise between the CED and Laserdisc, where it was. The CED would. You know what
it looked like to me? Didn't it look like to you? It looked like an enormous floppy disk.
Yeah, it did. It's probably. I mean, the way it was read was probably much like the way a hard drive is read. It's like because the CED system was basically a video record. It used a much better needle and much more fine grooves, but it was basically the same thing. And it used sort of a caddy system where you would put the disc in so they wouldn't get dust on it. Of course, it didn't help. Dust would get in there, and they all skipped.
I had a friend who had the CED system, and I thought it was the most awesome thing I'd ever seen.
It was just the concept of it was awesome. It's just,
it was so great.
The delivery of it was not quite, but the idea of the thing you just put it in and it plays magic. But that didn't come out until like 3 years after Laserdisc, although neither of them were quite ready to be released because they both had these weird issues that Laserdisc would eventually work out, but CED never really got the chance because that was gone and came out in 81. It was gone by 84.
Avco eventually stopped making those machines and those tapes and merged with Embassy Pictures. And I think you'll probably remember the old theme that played at the beginning of their tapes. And you can find a lot more information about Cartrovision by going to obsoletemedia.org, and I'll put the link here. And you can also find the interesting video stuff about it from Ben Minot's excellent Oddity Archive.
Yeah, great shows that he does. Yes.
Yes, Ben is wonderful. I like him a lot. I got to interview him for VHS Rewind, so I thought that was pretty cool.
But okay, so you're talking about Avco Embassy. That goes right into Magnetic Video because they were one of the first. Magnetic Video actually had a deal with Avco Embassy for a little while. Like those first early titles on Magnetic Video, some of them were Avco Embassy films.
Yeah,
The Graduate was on there.
Magnetic Video was, it was primarily like a Fox company, 20th Century Fox.
Not at first.
Well, it was established by a man named Andre Blay. Based in Farmington Hills, Michigan, where the CBS Fox and Fox video plants were for a long time. I don't know if they're still there now, but it became like the first corporation to release theatrical movies on Betamax and VHS. But Magnetic was more of kind of like a, hey, you got a movie you want to put out on video? Talk to us.
Yeah,
and we'll do it for you.
Yeah, I remember. And
so they took advantage of a lot of deals with smaller companies.
When he started, he basically said to Fox, he said, "Look, I'll buy the rights to a certain amount of your movies," and it was older movies, it was older Fox movies, older Fox well-known movies. So you had your Patton, your Planet of the Apes, older Fox titles,
right? And
they sold the rights to a certain amount, but nothing new. I think French Connection was in there.
The French Connection and The Omen. And
Omen
And
would have been relatively new by then. If it was 1977.
The Omen had like this distinction of being a Magnetic Video title first, then a 20th Century Fox video title, and then a CBS Fox title. So you will find we're going to talk about a lot of zombie movies actually throughout the run of this series that we're doing, but this is one of them. The Omen is definitely one of these zombie movies that kept popping up from different companies.
Well, and rightly so, because it's probably one of their more well-known titles that always sells.
Yeah, it was one of their high
So
profile.
yeah, and
So a lot of people thought that Magnetic Video did not release high profile. It did. It very much did. The French Connection being one of them too.
Well,
Alien, the first
was
Alien.
yes. Yeah, by the time, I mean, after the initial success of those first titles, I think they sold them for what, like $60 at the time, which was like a lot of damn money. It still is.
Well, no, actually more. They, yeah, in my research, like, well, it came down to if you bought in bulk. If you bought in bulk, you got a good deal. But if you called up Magnetic Video and said, I want a copy of Alien on VHS, it would cost you about $100.
Wow.
And they would send it to you. But if you were like when you were starting out, like say in the video industry, which we're going to get into the story of George Atkinson in a minute. But if you have like a video business and you wanted multiple copies, it was very rare back then. You wouldn't find like stores were not like Blockbuster or Hollywood or any of the chains where they would have like, you know, when I worked at Blockbuster a long time ago, we would like order 30 or 40.
In fact,
copies of big movies that we knew were going to be huge.
My first sort of video memories of going to the video store, they'd have one beta and one VHS, and that was it. And if you wanted a movie, you get on a waiting list and wait. Sometimes weeks.
Well, even then, I'd say by '85 when we got our first VCR, we very rarely saw beta titles anymore. It seemed like VHS had taken over
maybe it's
point.
more of a local thing of maybe this is some sort of weird sort of beta area, the Seattle. I was in the suburban Seattle area. It's called Bellevue.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna guess just because beta machines were always being sold. At least by then, by mid '80s, all you could get was like Sony and the occasional Toshiba and Sanyo, but that was it. But yeah, you go to the video store early on. It was like you get one of each. If you were lucky, they had beta.
Now, Magnetic Video, they were so it's interesting to me because one of my great holy grails that I would love to find in excellent condition if I could would be like Alien on Magnetic Video because now the way it was, I mean, it was so the boxes were extremely cheap. On the back cover, they didn't even give you like a synopsis or credits or anything. They just said more titles on Magnetic Video, and they would give you like the titles of what they had in there, what they had licensed.
And this is something that would happen.
It was very generic.
This is something that would happen early on, and it kind of goes over into Warner Brothers. They wouldn't even be like the movie poster. It would be like a publicity still from the movie on the cover.
Yes.
But it wouldn't, and then it would be the title, and then they would have the title under. But it wouldn't be like.
Sometimes, yeah, but I did notice, like as I was saying, the Alien tape does have the poster. It's like
that does
in
have
space, no one can hear you scream, which is just, cover designs were so much better. We'll get into that though later on. But I also did want to mention that Magnetic Video was the only video tape distributor for the movie Let It Be, the Beatles movie,
which goes to their side deals of like other companies of like United Artists was one of the companies.
United Artists produced that, right?
Yeah, and
also Let It Be was released by RCA for their CED. I don't know that it's available on Laserdisc. Would you?
It is, and it's highly sought after. Although it's such a
who made the Laserdisc? Do you know? Was it Magnetic?
Yeah, actually, it's so interesting that you bring this up because I actually have a Magnetic Video Laserdisc. It's not a great title. It's actually like a college football thing. But when I saw it was only $5. I'm like, you know what? This is like a piece of history. So I bought it, and it's Magnetic Video, but it's the post after being purchased by 20th Century Fox Magnetic Video. So it's a slightly different logo, but it is definitely says Magnetic Video on. I think copyright 1981. It was right before they transitioned to just 20th Century Fox Video.
Let It Be is very difficult to find. You can't find it.
No.
It's almost impossible. The only time I ever looked at the movie, I think, before somebody started snipping it, putting snippets up on YouTube, and you could, the only way I saw it was on tape. And it was a really worn out tape too. It had been played a million times.
Yeah. It's one of those just lost movies of like the rights are not, they can't get the rights they don't want to pay. And
they
I'm
keep
sure
trying.
the Beatles own it. The Beatles own it or something.
Yeah,
and
it depends on where the ownership lies, because I'm not quite sure if it was the Michael Jackson estate who still owns most of that content.
No, he had to sell it during all of his unfortunateness. I think he had to sell it for lawyers and everything. So I think that Paul McCartney owns it again. I think it's like the estate and the estate of John. I think they co-bought it back or something.
Now, what happened was when the Beatles released their anthology series, they remastered the movie, and they did a upscale remastering of it with the intention of putting it out. But again, it never did come out.
Never got out because it's the rights. Of
I don't understand.
And
I hear different stories. I hear Paul McCartney is very much for releasing it, and then I hear George Harrison says, Paul says he wants to release it, but he's actually really embarrassed by the movie, and I am too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the version that you can get, whether it be on VHS or Laserdisc, I think it was shot on video, or at least parts of it were. Then it was transferred to film and letterboxed. So it's like it's in a slightly widescreen, probably 1:6:6 the British ratio. So it's like 1:6:6, slightly zoomed in already because it was shot with some video content and transferred to film. So it already looks kind of funky. And then you watch it on this, and it's a panned and scanned version of that already zoomed in. It's like double zoomed in.
Yes.
So
it's going to be really horribly grainy.
Yeah.
To look at.
And the sound is it's not going to be in stereo. It's not going to be.
Yeah.
It's not going to be of any really good quality. I mean, it's certainly a time capsule of something, but it's one of those things where once it becomes available in a better version, whatever this is not going to be where it's like when heavy metal finally came out. It's like, now you can get heavy metal. Heavy metal took forever to come out because of the rights with the music.
Right, yeah. With magnetic video, what happened was, I guess, it says in the fall of '77, Andre Blake came up with the idea to release these films on video.
Yeah.
And he talked to Fox, and apparently Fox was in financial difficulty. I would probably speculate from all the money they threw into Cleopatra, the Elizabeth Taylor movie.
They were still recovering from
bankrupted.
They were still. I mean, Star Wars basically saved that studio.
So magnetic video for a time was the linchpin to the video rental business. Videos weren't priced to sell because it cost a lot to manufacture at the time. So it wasn't out of the ordinary to see the videotape selling for $100. So,
but people bought them. People bought them. They're like, I can buy a movie. This is awesome.
Right.
And the people that had VCRs were probably somewhat well off anyway, because if you can afford something that would be, say, about $4,000 in today's money, and which is like a good used car.
Yes.
If you can afford that, you can afford an extra $100 to own, Patton or Planet of the Apes or something like that.
If you wanted to. But this is where the birth of the video rental begins. A man named George Atkinson. He had a store, and he decided, because I guess he noticed around where the store was, people were buying VCRs. So he was like, wait a minute, these cost $100. No one's going to pay $100 for a movie. That was his line of reasoning. And he says, I'll rent them. So he bought one Betamax and one VHS copy of each of the first titles from Magnetic Video. He charged $50 for an annual membership and $100 for a lifetime membership, it would cost $10 a day to rent videos. So, you do the math, and it's a return on investment would be like 10 days. He would already make his money back.
Rent a movie for one day.
We also have to remember that I know it was like the late 70s and the economy wasn't that great, but for some reason, I don't know, people had more money in their pocket than they do now. I mean, no one's going to spend like $40 to rent a movie today.
I can buy a movie for $20.
Or even less.
Like the only reason I actually own Batman versus Superman is on Blu-ray is because it was on sale for like $15, and I'm like, you know what? And this was like right when it came out too. So I'm like, I'm buying this movie.
This is interesting because Blu-rays are I've been I've been racking up my Blu-ray collection quite a bit, and what I did, I had a couple of titles that I wanted to do for Vintage Cable Box, Somewhere in Time and Blue Thunder, and I was like, you know what?
Both
let
good
me
ones.
check Amazon. So I go over to Amazon, and they've got them both for $5 each on Blu-ray.
On Blu-ray, so in full HD,
Yes,
you can have your Roy Scheider and Christopher Reeve
yes.
fix.
I figured I would get them anyway because number one, Somewhere in Time is kind of a special movie to me. It was shot at the Grand Hotel in Mackinac Island, Michigan, and I went to Mackinac Island, Michigan, with my then girlfriend at the time, who I wound up marrying, and we were there. We saw the place, and as a matter of fact, Regan was there last year when she went with mommy to visit her parents in Michigan, and they took her to Mackinac Island. So I have kind of a special connection to it. So, and also, Christopher Reeve and Jane Seymour, forget about it. It's a story by Richard Matheson. He wrote the script. It's not that great of a movie, but it's just wonderful to watch.
You know what? It's not.
And Blue
necessarily...
Thunder was one of the few movies that I remember from cable television at the time that I watched constantly. So, what was I saying? Yeah. So Blu-rays have definitely come down in price. Some of the more proprietary titles can be expensive. You can if I want something special that hasn't been mass produced as much as a movie like Somewhere in Time or Blue Thunder, like say I want a Blu-ray of the Jimmy Stewart, Kim Novak movie Bell Book and Candle. It's made by a company called Twilight or something. They licensed the title from Columbia Pictures, and it costs like $50 on Blu-ray. It's hard to find. Yeah, I mean, well, they're made in a limited run, but we'll get into that later because I do have some issues about some of the things that are being done these days. But back to like magnetic. Now at $10 a day in 1977, in adjusted dollars, we're looking at 40. It still launched video, and it became an enormous success. And magnetic video wound up becoming very, very big over the next 4 years. And so they started licensing titles from different smaller companies. Yeah. Because I guess Viacom. Charlie Chaplin, Avco Embassy, of course, ABC Pictures,
ABC, ITC, and that's kind of like my only memory of renting a magnetic title is the Muppet movie.
Yes,
which was an ITC produced movie, but it wasn't released.
And a very popular rental at the time too.
Oh, it was excellent, and that's by the time we got to the video store, there was like pretty much all the companies except for even though they were suing them, there was an MCA Video. Even though they were suing Betamax, they still had a company where they were making money off of them.
Right.
There was an MCA Video. There was no Disney at that time, but they would be. But yeah, magnetic video probably was the ones that I saw, and I swear every day I would go. Every time I would go in, I go, "Do you have Star Wars? You have Star Wars? You have Star Wars? You have Star Wars?" Because there was you didn't know.
Star Wars was it's interesting. The making of Star Wars.
Yeah, they had that. They had that.
Was a tape that was magnetic video, but Star Wars itself was released first as a 20th Century Fox video, Fox Box, which was another thing that is another one of my thing with the Warner clamshell. The Fox Box is so incredible.
Well, it started as a video rental library title. That was when they were doing
for rental only. It would say
rental, and I think that's when, because it went from
that was when. Well, yeah, okay.
And maybe we'll get to that. We'll get to that later about
there was a lawsuit that was put against Atkinson. He was threatened with a lawsuit for renting the videos, but his lawyers, he lawyered up.
Yeah.
And they checked out U.S. copyright law, and he had the right to rent and resell if he wanted to. And then, because the stories are so mixed up, a lot of people think that there was this enormous conspiracy to kill the rental business by going sell-through. That's not the way I hear it. The way I hear it was Michael Jackson's Thriller, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Mm-hmm. Now, magnetic video wound up going defunct, and I think that was part of the overall plan. I think that 20th Century Fox bought out magnetic video because it became a 20th Century Fox video company, and it says it on the back. Once
Fox bought them, they still retained all those rights to all those other side deals, so they still own the rights to United Artists. They still own the rights to the Abco Embassy, at least for a little while. Yeah,
they retained the rights. And then this coincides with the beginning of 20th Century Fox Video with these unusual boxes. They were bigger boxes with trays inside, and you would slide it out. There was like this little thing on the side. There was like this little where it said red, beta, or VHS, and you push it.
I think the chronology is they become 20th Century Fox Home Video. When they do that, they become, for just a little while, they become the video rental library thing where they have their movies and they sell them only to video stores, and then video stores can rent them, but they're only sell, but like, so like the early ones were in these very nice, I'm not going to say clamshells, but you know, like plastic, they were nice, these nice plastic, I sent you the picture.
Yes.
And this kind of coincided with them finally getting, even though they already had United Artists.
Now that was the most interesting thing I saw was you sent a picture of James Bond titles.
That was when they started with James Bond. Was when they moved over to.
What did they do? They sort of did what Warner Brothers did. They took like the image of the Fox box and put it in, paper stock and put it in these clamshells. But that's a little bit later because that was also part of the repackaging, I guess, when they had their deal with United Artists was the last company, I believe, that had licensed with Fox at the time, which 1981.
Okay.
But with these Fox boxes, it was like they slipped out. And I remember seeing Star Wars on 20th Century Fox Video on that, because it had a different kind of a case, a sticker on the case, a label. It was the Star Wars logo in red, I think.
Might have been, yeah.
And it was against this gray background.
Kind of dark gray, yeah.
It was like a dark gray, and it said 20th Century Fox Video on the top. And these are very cool to look at, but it's very hard to find them in pristine condition because of the mechanics and the wear and tear of opening and closing those boxes. Yeah. So they really look bad these days.
And they were even worse for the betas because the case, I think, was the same size, and they would have even more paper and more filling in there because the beta tape was smaller.
Because they wanted it to look uniform alongside the other tapes.
And then they would there was this little open space where they could put like a beta label or a VHS label, and they could just trade it out.
Yeah, that brings to mind memories, if you remember when compact discs started. Mm-hmm. They put them in these big boxes. You remember?
Yeah. I remember.
They put the jewel cases in these big boxes so that they would fit.
They would fit in the same space. I think that you could basically fit like two side-by-side ones in the space of like one sort of square-ish record. Yes, and it would be these long boxes. Man.
I remember buying those boxes and then just tossing them.
Yeah, I have memories of like
it was so wasteful.
Seeing the boxes on the street, they just they buy the CD, they're like, they're gone.
And then then later on, of course, you had environmentalists saying, "Hey, you're just creating new garbage."
They'd be correct.
Unless you kept them, if you figured out a way, if you were forward thinking and you kept them.
I mean, it's interesting how like later with DVD, they would keep the general shape of a VHS tape. Or tape-ish, but it would be like a little thinner, and then you would have the disc in the box would sort of be holded in, and then you would push it in, and then it would pop out. And they've kept that. They shrank it for Blu-ray, but it's basically the same. It's the same like sort of width, but not the same thickness.
It's probably as simple an explanation as economics. Just as they had the big box for the CD so that it would fit into the LP display stands and cases. Having the VHS, it would be able to fit as you're replacing VHS with DVD. It would just slide right in there and fit stock.
Well, also, I remember when they first came out with DVD, like at least Sony did this, and Sony, I think, and Universal. They'd give you a choice of like you could get kind of the big box, or maybe they wouldn't even give you a choice, or you could get the movie in a jewel case, like a CD. Mm-hmm. And I think it was a good idea to switch over to sort of the somewhat tape-sized sort of jewel case, only because it creates a confusion where if you have a movie, but it's in a
same
CD
with Blu-ray.
Case, yeah,
right. The same with Blu-ray. It creates a confusion because Blu-ray discs are the same size as DVDs, but they put them in these smaller boxes,
slightly smaller, and a different. There'll be like a blue case. So there's no confusion. Of course, if you're an old person like my parents, they'd probably still get confused. But it's magnetic video, but it's not owned by Fox. Then it's magnetic video, and it is owned by Fox for a little while.
Right.
Then it becomes 20th Century Fox Home Video with both video rental library tapes and these oddly shaped boxes that move around and get like tear up really
That's
easy.
Right. You know, I do have a title that did come from a Fox box, but I don't have the box. I just have the tape because I grabbed it one day because they were going to throw it out, and I was working someplace. And I said, we just got a new one, and we can't find the box. You want this? And I was like, yeah. And it turned out to be Woody Allen's Everything You Always Want to Know About Sex, but We're Afraid to Ask.
Mm-hmm. Probably a United Artists title, I'm going to guess.
Yes, UA. And UA also figures into the story later because of all the problems they had. But I have a few ideas and theories about that as well. So it turns out, David, you were actually right. You did go to the video station because Atkinson... he established the first major chain.
Yeah, it must have been because I remember it was called Video Station. I remember that.
And it was a store, right? I mean, it was
it was a
actual
store. You go.
with
It was much like it was kind of a small-ish. Think of it. Sort of imagine a smallish Blockbuster, and you just go in and you'd get a tape, and there would be a beta, and there'd be one beta, there'd be one VHS, and then they would put the tapes in these sort of that's what I'm looking for. These sort of they were like clamshells. They had sort of separate clamshells just for the tapes. Like they'd have the cases sitting out, and then they would have the clamshells
behind the desk.
Behind the desk, yeah. Behind the desk,
like on bookshelves behind, because that's what we had at the video store.
Yeah, there was like security issues, I guess. So you'd go there, and then you'd get the tape, and it would be in this very protected, sort of a brown faux leather kind of cover with sort of a black. Very clamshell.
This all fits into what we're talking about because this is part of what we're going to talk a little bit about the video stores that we went to, that we frequented.
What we're getting to with the Fox stuff is, okay, so it's the Fox with the weird boxes.
Yes.
Then it becomes CBS Fox.
CBS Fox, which is the one that we all remember as kids, which has this logo.
The great logo, the great music, the great everything.
Yes.
But because it was a cooperation with CBS, there had already been a CBS video affiliation with MGM. There was MGM CBS video around the time of the magnetic time. There was MGM CBS, and there were certain titles that used to be on MGM CBS video that are now on CBS Fox video. Like My Fair Lady was a CBS, and now it's a Paramount title because
it's so
Paramount
weird.
is part of
That's
CBS.
so weird that happens.
And that goes to like what I was saying before, and we'll get to the I want to sort of touch on.
Well, first I did want to ask. I don't know if I asked you before, but how many James Bond titles could you recall that were released with those Fox boxes before they switched over to CBS Fox? Do you know?
The Fox boxes. I think it was sort of probably an initial rollout of a few, and probably scattered it, much like they used to do with Laserdisc and DVD. They would release them in chunks. In not in order, but there's probably like a few of the popular movies, but the time between when they got the rights to them and then it became CBS Fox is probably a really short time. But from when, because I think they got the rights to the James Bond movies like 81, 82, something like that.
81, 82, and it was right at the end of the Fox box.
And then you have CBS Fox happens literally like late 82, early 83, maybe.
Yes.
So you've got like this. So the titles are being released, then it gets switched over to CBS Fox. Then they just all become Fox boxes. There are a few like, and I showed you like the James Bond. There's like a For Your Eyes Only is in that video rental library thing, and then it's a Fox box like weird wobbly thing, and then it's a CBS Fox like within a year. As is like Octopussy comes out a couple years later. That's a CBS Fox title because that's in 1983. Right. And then after that, you've got like the Fox box becomes, it looks like the Fox box, but it isn't. It's like a regular straight big box like you would get with everything else. It was the same shape and size, and yet it looked bigger for some reason. It always looked like taller and bigger, but it was the same shape and the same size. It
was deeper. It was a little deeper because it slid in. You would get
the beta would fit in that same case because they wanted to not like spend more money on a smaller tape. Some companies would make a smaller case and a smaller tape and a smaller thing.
That's right. Yeah.
CBS Fox would keep the same size, and then they just put some sort of insert in there to put the beta tape in. But that kind of goes to, okay, so now they're CBS Fox, but then after they become CBS Fox, within like a couple of years, they create these sort of offshoot, sort of, they're Fox labels, but they like, so you've got your Playhouse video for kids, and then you have your Key Video. And before we get into Key Video, I'd like to talk about Playhouse here for a second, because that's where you get the full release of all of the Planet of the Apes movies is on the kids label Playhouse Video, even though they're Fox films.
That's unusual.
And I've always felt that
a good portion of them were like PG rated, right? And
actually, no, that's the thing people don't understand.
No?
The first 3 Planet of the Apes movies and the last Planet of the Apes movie, they're all rated G, technically.
Really?
I know.
There's some like seriously intense violence.
Oh yes, I mean you've got
those later Planet of the Apes
the
movies.
first one it's blood and violence. You've got Heston Man-ass. You've got a goddamn you all to hell at the end. I mean this is G. And of course, when was this released? 1968.
Yeah.
So people were dealing with horribleness on TV every day. It's just another day in the late 60s. So
well, yeah. There's also like the fact that I think Jesus Christ Superstar was released in 1973. It features a lot of torture and a crucifixion, and it's rated G. So
it's fun for the whole family. But yeah, so they released that, and they've released a whole bunch of other sort of some Muppet titles, which would later then go to like Disney. But that's a whole other
Playhouse Video also licensed Shirley Temple movies.
Shirley Temple, a few Charlie Brown things in there, I think.
Yeah, and Dr. Seuss and
Dr.
Mr. Rogers.
Basically, their kids label, although Planet of the Apes
and Doctor Who, very early Doctor Who releases as well.
I always felt like the weird thing was that the Planet of the Apes movies in their entirety didn't come out on all of them until 1985. Like. That's something where it's like they did the first 2 and then stopped. Those are both actually like old magnetic titles are the first 2, but then they didn't release the rest of them. And it's like, you need the complete set. And if people would have bought them, I don't know why. I never understood the logic behind that. I'm sure they had their reasons. Maybe it was like a TV, like contract thing where they couldn't or something. I don't know. But so eventually they released all of them in a good quality in 1985, beta VHS. I watched them. I taped them. Yes. I would record them so I could have a copy on beta to beta.
Playhouse and then Key Video. So
Key Video,
Key Video is something I really remember. Not the best quality, but I can talk about the first video store that we went to when we got our VCR. We got our VCR, and it was 85, I think. Now this wasn't what you would call a video store. It was like what you said before. You said it was an electronics store. And they would sell not only electronic. I mean, they would sell TVs and VCRs and things like that, and even CDs and laserdisc players. But they also had kitchen appliances. Like you go in, it's kind of like a smaller version of a Best Buy or something like that, right?
Yeah.
A smaller store. I mean,
much more personal experience. You'd get a salesman. He'd be like the only guy there. And
yeah, it was much more. I think that's where we got the VCR. Actually, as a matter of fact, it was marked down. It was a lovely machine, by the way. I mean, I know it was 2-head. I don't think it even recorded an EP, if I'm not mistaken or anything.
But if you got it in 85, then it almost had to.
It might have. I'm not sure. Or SLP.
SLP and EP are the same thing.
Yes, they would call it SLP for certain models. Like maybe the cheaper knockoffs, they would call it EP. Now, this store had rentals also, and it had it was the back wall.
Yeah.
I don't think that the tapes were separated. They might have been separated, but it was a very small collection. I mean, but they did have like a whole run of Key Videos there. From what I remember, I mean, Key Video was like the lower end titles, I guess. Not the stuff that was directly.
Well, they would be Fox. Some of them would actually be Fox titles, and they would be kind of the weird Fox titles. Like a Shock Treatment was a Key.
Shock Treatment? Okay, now. I wanted to mention Helter Skelter. For some reason, the movie was on Key Video at the time.
Which was a TV movie that was just very popular.
Yes, it was very popular. Also, The Hustler. The Other Side of Midnight, which is like this real trashy, campy movie that you would probably love. Mm-hmm. Shock Treatment, of course, and The Buddy System. Now, what I wanted to mention about the shock treatment key video, I was looking for that title. It was very hard to find at the time, and the time I was interested in seeing it. I had just seen Rocky Horror, and we're talking like maybe the mid '90s,
All right.
maybe
It's so funny that-
'94.
It's so funny you were looking for it because my brother, this goes back to like way later when our local video store, which was World of Toys, then World of Video, then Video World, they had around 1992, they were like, you know what, we're getting out of beta. We're selling them all. And they had on beta shock treatment. And my brother bought it for like $5.
That's okay. Now,
and he still had it up till just a few years ago when there was a move. I think it either got thrown away or I don't know if it still has it because he doesn't even have his beta machine anymore. But he had it. He bought it for like $5.
well, the shock treatment. This is very interesting. I wanted to find a movie. I was looking for it forever. I eventually had to get a membership at Kim's Video, which was a very popular video store in New York. They had very rare, hard-to-find titles. I found Crime Wave there, as a matter of fact. That was unavailable.
Oh.
You couldn't find a lot of these. They went into what is called moratorium, out of print. So I found the key video of shock treatment, brought it home. I had 2 VCRs. I copied it, of course.
Yeah, and if it was
Now-
probably old enough, it didn't have the copy protection on it.
It's actually, this key video is one of the worst videotapes ever made. The video quality was terrible, of course. It was 4:3, of course, but it was also a mono mix. It wasn't in stereo. It was terrible. Shock
Wait a minute,
treatment's
it wasn't in stereo because
it wasn't in stereo. It wasn't.
because let me say something. I tested my brother's tape on my beta when I had a beta hi-fi stereo much later. I tested because it says right on the box hi-fi stereo.
Are you sure that it wasn't
it
a
says
CBS
Hi-Fi
Fox
stereo. Now,
title or a Fox?
It's not.
video
No,
title?
it's if you look it up on the internet, if you look up the box, it says on key, it'll say hi-fi stereo right across the front.
Well, this was definitely mono, and it was extremely muddy. It was a very
well,
muddy.
yeah, it didn't sound good though. I was going to say that. It
I
said
mean, like,
stereo. It was in hi-fi stereo, but it didn't sound like it was a particularly good mix or good. But it was stereo-esque, at least
yes,
from what I could hear.
maybe dual channel, but it didn't have any of the stereo characteristics. And then there are these video artifacts, and there were problems with this. There were speed issues with the tape as it was played.
Oh, okay. So it was not a good. It was like a beat up tape. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And then it was re-released as a CBS Fox home video release, and then Fox Video, and it was the same source that they used because it still had the same artifacts, the same bad sound, and that same speed issue.
Yeah, I'm remembering now. It sounded like warbly.
It was terribly warbly.
That's weird. Yeah, I think it's just they didn't care. It was probably like it was a flop when it came out. I mean, it could be even more of a flop than Rocky Horror Picture Show because Rocky Horror Picture Show, it was a flop when it came out, but then they were able to do the midnight screenings and make money with it. Whereas this was a flop when it came out and nobody cared, and I'm surprised it even came out on video.
It was, it's, I actually really enjoy the movie because I can accept it on its own merits. I'm one of these, I'll just do it like that. I won't say, okay, it's going to be Rocky Horror 2 and it's going to be just as good. I'm not going to be like that, especially since it's so many years. I mean, I really didn't catch on to the Rocky Horror phenomenon until much later.
I remember an interview with Richard O'Brien, and he's going, it's not a sequel, it's not a prequel, but an equal to the Rocky Horror Picture Show. So he was hyping it. He was saying, this is just as good.
He wanted to sell the movie as much as he could, but then later on, of course, he says, well, obviously we make mistakes and all this stuff. I hate when people do that, but I do understand the need to sell things. It's like every time something comes around and they say, oh, this is going to be the greatest thing in the world, and then 20 years later they're like, well, we made a misstep. But it's all based on public perception. And
I wanted to sort of bring up that Better Off Dead was a key title,
right?
And it was one of those weird CBS floating titles where it's like it was made by CBS Films and distributed by Warner Brothers, and then it was on Key Video, which was a Fox company.
Yes.
And then it was moved over. I think it became either a CBS Fox title or just a Fox Video title. Then years later, I guess the rights fully went back to CBS, and now it's on Paramount Home Video, because CBS and Paramount are the same company now. So it's this weird, like a whole bunch of different studios are involved in this one movie that everybody thinks is awesome, and but yet weird, but nobody saw.
It's kind of Better Off Dead was one of those movies you discovered, right? It was like,
hey, I saw it in the theater. I was there at the beginning. I saw it in the theater because I saw the trailer when I saw Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and I'm like, I'm seeing this movie because it like ends with that's a damn shame throwing away a perfectly good white boy like that. Yeah, like I was like, I'm seeing this movie. I want to see John Cusack fall in the garbage.
Right. I do remember seeing some trailers for the movie, but then when I first saw it, was on cable, I think, or satellite at the time. It might have been satellite. In 1986, I saw it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's Better Off Dead sort of qualifies as one of those zombie releases that gets a new life with each different, I guess, merger and acquisition that occurs within the video industry at the time.
Yeah.
And now it's being released by Paramount? Is that what
it's on Paramount? Yeah, I looked it up I think I sent you the picture. Yeah, it's on Paramount Home Video, at least on DVD.
Because Paramount is owned by CBS now?
It's owned by CBS, Paramount,
which I guess had the initial rights to the movie.
It's like CBS, Viacom, Paramount. It's all the same company now.
Okay, and the other title, of course, I want to talk about was The Buddy System.
Yes.
And this is such a strange case. It was one of my holy grails for a long time. I couldn't find it. So I eventually shelled out and bought a videotape of it, and then I hear from you and other people that, oh, well, you can find it here. And yeah, it's, the thing, the Buddy System is one of these titles that received endless play on cable TV constantly. And it was something.
I remember watching it on cable, actually. I remember, like in 1985-ish, I think.
It was like they showed it every other day, practically. And it's still extremely hard to find, even on video. I mean, you can find some places. I actually managed I didn't get a still sealed one like the Nathan Hayes one, but I got a very good one that was in very good condition. So I tracked it down, and you can't find this on DVD or Blu-ray. I'm not even sure if it's available on Beta or Laserdisc. I looked it up on Laserdisc. I couldn't find it on Laserdisc, which is so unusual because
now it's a Fox distributed made film, right? That went on Key Video, I think.
I believe it was made by 20th Century Fox. A movie will have rights to be shown on television, and it will even have a right to be shown to be distributed by video. But then new technologies are not written into the contract, so you have harder time finding these.
That's something you bring up. Like, okay, yes.
But the Buddy System is shocking to me because it's directed by Glenn Jordan, who is a name, from a script by Mary Agnes Donahue, a celebrated writer in many different circles. Stars Richard Dreyfuss, Susan Sarandon, Nancy Allen, Gene Stapleton, and a young Will Wheaton.
Will Wheaton, I remember.
And this is a movie that it's there are so many there are more than a few high-profile movies with high-profile casts that you can't find in any other formats. This, we'll get into it with Paramount. We'll talk about Looking for Mr. Goodbar next time. That's another title that you simply cannot find on any format other than those very early home video formats. Also features a song by Gladys Knight, for crying out loud. I mean, it's actually it was one of my favorite movies because I guess maybe it was like, you know how Top 40 radio works. They play a song for you, and then they continue to play it, and then they continue to play it, and you're like, stop playing this song. I'm so sick of hearing that. Oh, I'm starting to like this song. I'm starting to like this song. It's like this, the human condition of getting addicted to something. It's like an addiction thing. And what do we know about when I don't have it here? But what do we know about when Key Video folded?
It couldn't have been they couldn't have been around for very long. I'm thinking like from 85 to maybe like 86, and then they were like, you know what?
Actually, you know what? It might have been the end of the 80s, the beginning of the 90s, because I do remember that Key Video, and I don't know, you sent me an ad. Mm-hmm. Now they had these collections.
Yeah.
Key Video licensed a lot of Woody Allen movies, a lot of Sidney Poitier movies, things like that. And it was like this kind of thing where it was like a set or a collection of movies. Mm-hmm. And I think that was at the end of their run.
Couldn't have been.
That might have been the last gasp.
Couldn't have been past 80. I mean, I know CBS Fox itself lasted into the very early 90s because I have a laser disc of The Return of the Jedi, which came
Right.
out in late 1990. And it's still CBS Fox in late 1990. I don't know when the switch happened. I think it happened sometime in 91, 92, somewhere in there. I'm trying to remember movies I rented. Must have happened in 91. That's all I can think of. Maybe
Right.
it was
Now-
around.
Oh, these were sell-through titles too. I forgot to mention that these special collection things were like 1995, maybe even 9.95. This was around the time that, I mean, it was like becoming more common to buy titles instead of renting them, and that might have contributed to the death of the video store in and of itself, renting. Because like people were like buying, everything was now being available, and this is maybe will lead into like our final discussion for this episode is the video stores that we went to.
Yeah, like you asked me, like, what video stores did you go to? Okay, it was Video Station at first.
Right.
Then it was, and we still had mostly beta, so it would be like, it was this weird sort of, all these video stores started popping up like literally like within walking distance of my house. So, we got Movies Galore. We had National Video. We still had Video Station, although we didn't go. We had Video Station. There was a local video store that I didn't go to because it was too expensive. There was what else? There was Pop and Go Video, which we had discussed. They had beta and VHS. They also had like a setup in there. They had like a few beta and a few VHS machines in there with like TVs, and they were showing movies and everything. It was really cool. Then I was doing the math of like, when did Blockbuster come to our neighborhood? Because that pretty much. Oh, and there's a place called The Warehouse.
Okay.
And they had lots of movies too, and they were relatively close. And then they opened even closer. So there's like all these different, and we would kind of like, and then we kind of stopped going to the video world place, the world of video, because they moved and they stopped renting beta, and then we didn't, and like other video stores were closer. So we were going to various video stores. There was our local Safeway started renting VHS. So we go there. And then around that time, like 1990, I think was around the time that Blockbuster came in, and then that kind of became one of our main. And then it became basically Blockbuster, Warehouse, which was close, and Safeway. It would be like three places we'd go most of the time. And by then, all the little stragglers like Pop and Go was gone. Once Blockbuster came in, they pretty much wiped out all the little stores.
Yeah, the way it was in Philadelphia was. We didn't have that many like video rental stores at first. In 1985, our first membership, we got a video membership with the place that we bought the VCR in. It came with it, right? But they didn't have that many titles. They only had like a small wall. Everything was displayed right out there. Because this other store, it was too far out of the way. This place, this electronic store. We were living closer to the Society Hill section, I guess, of Philadelphia, which is near Center City. Our first video membership in that area was a place called Green's Drugstore. Okay, and Green's Drugstore was a drugstore. It was like a mom and pop drugstore. It wasn't like a Rite Aid or anything like that, or a CVS or whatever you find. And their video section was basically like this carousel type contraption where they took the cover box, smashed it flat, put it in a plastic thing, and then put it on this carousel, and you just swing it around until you found a title that you like.
Yes, there was actually a video store like in one of our drugstores that was like that, although they would use the boxes. But yeah, they had like this thing, and you just sort of look in the window and you sort of move it around and do that. And then you would go, I'm going to guess you would like pick the thing up and go.
And then take it over to the register. Yeah. They would grab the tape for you.
Yeah.
And then after that, they also small selection. But then this is when the video stores started popping up. The actual dedicated video stores. So we went to a place called Society Hill Video, which had a better selection. It was like a big room. It was so unusual because it kind of looked like somebody's library if they had like a bunch of books in it or something. Big open room, and you had movies in their cases, maybe, I guess. No, maybe they weren't in their cases. Just the cover boxes all lined along each opposite wall. and you just grab them, and then you don't have to. It was high ceilings, so they gave you a ladder, like you would find in a library, right?
Yeah.
So you wanted to find a title that was really up there, up at the top. If you're looking in a certain section, you would obviously keep the adult movies really high up.
What year was this? Was this?
This was 86.
86. This is when you're still renting and not purchasing movies, right?
Yes. We were getting very close to buying the second VCR at that point, but not yet. And then there was TLA Video, the Theater of Living Arts, which we've talked about before, which was this repertory cinema house that would also show Rocky Horror on Fridays and Saturdays. They had a video store, and they had some of the rarer titles. We went in there. We rented a lot of stuff, too, from TLA. And then after that, when we moved to New York, then we had memberships everywhere. We had memberships at Kim's Video, Tower Video, RKO Warner Video, Champagne Video, and a couple of others.
I would rent movies occasionally at Tower Video, but it was more because it was kind of a pain to get there. So that was more like if they didn't have it anywhere else, I'm like, okay, I need to see Critters 3. I'm going to have to go to Tower Video for this one.
I think we had 3 locations in New York City, or at least on Manhattan, and so we always grabbed videos. I remember that, but I got my first jobs. My first jobs were at video stores. RKO was really awesome too. RKO was great. They had an enormous selection. Think Blockbuster with porn. That was what RKO was. RKO Video. But again, they all went out of business. Yeah, they're not around anymore.
They couldn't. Even Blockbuster eventually ate itself up. They couldn't. Yeah, and I actually remembered something, like as we were talking about, the first movie I think I actually purchased was a used, and I think you'll like this, was a used copy, although in very good shape, of Richard Pryor live in concert.
Oh!
On Time Life Video. It was like a Time Life tape, because I think it was recorded like for HBO or something, which is part of Time Life at the time. And so it was like on Time Life home video, and you probably remember the Time Life logo and the CTL on it and everything. And it was in this very nice plastic container, a plastic case that you'd open up, and it was like
a library
tape.
Right?
Yeah, you'd open it, and it's a Time Life video. That was in 1985. I remember, and it cost me $20. It was like half my Christmas money. I purchased that, and then I purchased like some blank tapes. But
my review of that movie just came out on Vintage Cable Box. It is probably the funniest and greatest stand-up movie ever.
And it's a great.
I remember when I saw that movie, I was completely shocked and on the floor, and I couldn't believe.
And I think I was the perfect age to see it, where you need to. I would have just turned 14 at the time. So I would be 14. That is the perfect age where you can completely understand what's going on.
Yes.
And yet you have a young, fresh mind that needs to be educated of what comedy is. So it's like, I'm like, it's like this genius is going in my brain and will now influence me for the rest of my life. Of, okay, this is what's good. Now I will watch a George Carlin special and be even more knowledge in my brain.
Yeah. That was the, we were very fortunate back then, because that was the golden age for us. That seriously was the golden age of stand-up comedy. That was that was what inspired so many comics later on.
When the sell-through tapes really start are like right around then. Like I think the first big sell-through title was Top Gun.
No,
because that was 87.
As far as going out and buying a title. The way I've read it, it has been it was Michael Jackson's Thriller.
Yes.
Because what had happened was it was produced as an independent short film. John Landis and Michael Jackson had a deal where they basically controlled the video rights, and they sold the rights to places like Showtime. I think was first.
Showtime, yeah, I actually watched. And the weird thing is, to talk about like it had a weird edit where it's not like the video where I think they showed the music video and then the Michael Jackson Thriller, or the making of. I think that's how it works. Like they show that, and because it kind of like ends, and then like this blood goes down on the screen, and then they showed like this guy, like it's all messed up. Hello, welcome to the making of Michael Jackson, or something like that.
Yes,
I think that's how it goes. And
that's
on
how
Showtime,
it was, yeah.
on Showtime, they showed the making of first, then they showed the video.
Yes, that was the package.
When they showed it
The
on
deal
cable. When they showed it on
was
cable.
they made the video and then they ran it in theaters. It ran, I believe, against the reissue of Fantasia. Ooh. And then after that, they put together the making of Thriller as a video, sold the right for Showtime to show it for I don't know how long, for a predetermined amount of time, for like $250,000. And then they sold it to MTV, and MTV bought it for $200,000 or something. And then the rights, this producer calls them up and says, "We want to put this out on video, and it'll be bought." And they're like, "No one's going to pay $80 for this." And he says, "No, we're going to sell through." And what that meant was $24.95 or even lower. And then it became an enormous hit. And that showed, I guess, the video distribution companies and the studios that people would buy videos if you lowered the price. And yeah, Top Gun did originally come out as a sell-through title.
I look at Michael Jackson's Thriller thing as more of a specialty tape like that.
Uh-huh.
I think of it as more of like it's like its own special thing. It's not like a movie like, oh, I want to own this movie that I saw in the theater. Like that. I always think of a movie as a more premium product than a special.
It was what it was Michael Jackson was.
But Michael Jackson was hugely popular.
He was
the
hugest.
That was the biggest album,
pop star of the time.
And
that video sold several million copies and won awards, and it created an industry, and it did a whole bunch of things.
I'm trying. How many VCRs were there in 1983? Are we talking maybe 20? So if millions of copies of this are sold, and there's maybe only 20 million VCRs out there at the time, and they say they sell 5 million, that's literally like 1 in 4 people that have VCRs.
Yes.
Have Michael Jackson.
Yes, and people bought it. I mean, you would find. Yeah. I remember a friend of mine bought the video and he showed it to me, and it scared me, actually freaked me out quite a bit. This was before I had even seen.
I never got the video, probably because of a combination of it was on MTV so much,
they showed,
and it was on Showtime so much,
that
I would just watch that.
It was a complete like blanket saturation.
Yeah. Well, I didn't care. I just watched it over and over and over and over and over and over again.
So that is the beginning.
Of the video
industry.
We've only scratched the surface.
And it all started with magnetic video.
All started with them and this guy with a crazy idea of making money.
Yeah.
On something that people didn't, because there was no precedence for this.
Yes.
They made this up as they went along. Like however we're enjoying movies now, this was the beginning of this was the beginning of streaming, really. This is the beginning of purchasing movies online, because it's so weird.
I remember I asked you the question earlier a while back. I said, do you think kids today just cannot wrap their heads around the idea of getting up, going out, taking a walk, or getting in your car and going to a video store and renting a movie and then watching it and then having to return it? Do you think they would understand this?
Well, I think that they would, and as I would, of like, it's so easy now to do stuff. I'm lazy.
Yeah.
Now, I purchase a movie.
Oh, it's great for our generation because we don't have to get up and walk anymore.
But
we've let these brilliant people come up with a system where we can have anything we want.
Yeah, but it's like, even if I want to own a movie, I just push a button on my phone and Amazon delivers it in a couple of days.
Yeah.
And I now own a movie, and I just have to leave the house to get to the mail. Sometimes it's like right at my front door.
I will say right now, I prefer physical media. I'm not a fan of
and I tell you why.
Streaming.
I don't like being beholden to a company of like, you own it. It's really good quality. It's HD. It's even for some people it's even like 4K HDR, Dolby Atmos, everything.
Right.
You get a great experience, but you have to go online, which isn't a huge hassle for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But now you are beholden to this company. If this company ever goes out of business, you will not have access to your movie that you bought.
That's right.
Whereas if you buy it on a physical piece of something, you own it, you have it, you're only limited by your player crapping out. and players can always be purchased. And sometimes, like, this goes back to DVD and the DivX. How many people bought those like DivX Forever discs?
Yeah.
They can't. They can't unlock those discs.
Yeah.
They're unplayable.
It winds up being incredibly wasteful in the end. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that, for me, and probably for you, you just waiting till Friday because you knew that, you were going to go out to the video store and you were going to rent movies, and every weekend became an event, and there was popcorn. And to me, it separates going to a movie theater compared to watching a movie on your television. And movies, over time, it becomes a hassle. It becomes expensive. The movies aren't that great anymore for the money you're putting into buying a ticket. And you have a separate life with your VCR and renting a movie and seeing it on a comparatively smaller screen.
Mm-hmm. But I think it created the film snob. Like, you could be a film snob before, and you could go to art house theaters, and that would be a big pain in the butt.
Yeah.
But especially if you're a kid, you're now surrounded by all these different movies of all different kinds, because they could make money selling just about any kind of movie on video. So it'd be all these different kinds of movies of varying different. So you didn't know what you're going to get. So if you just saw the box,
which, yes, we will be talking about in a future episode, the popularity of a certain kind of movie that exploded with video. And I do mean exploded, and I think you know what kind of movies we're talking about here.
Yeah, which would probably be movies that were around the same time that magnetic video started. Because it was magnetic video and these mature content films.
And it could be argued, a very good argument, that those kind of movies are what really launched video.
And I was actually thinking about that earlier. Not launched. What I was thinking about earlier is, okay, adult films were in the theaters, but you had to go into probably a shady neighborhood in a theater with a bunch of people doing various things with themselves.
With sticky floors.
Yeah. Or you could go to a video store, go through the beads, and go into a magical world of way over large boxes.
Yes.
And only a few stains on the floor, and you could get there and you'd be like, oh, bright lights, big titties. I'm going to get this, which I actually did see. And
now I'm really curious about what that movie's about.
You want the plot? I'll actually give you the plot. It's the story of young women struggling to make it in this tough world, and they go to an audition being held for like dancers. I don't know. I think it's dancers or something. Run a bunch of guys who are like, hey, we'll have women come over. We'll get them naked. We'll have sex with them. And we'll tell them that we're running some sort of dancing thing. And we'll get or something like that.
So it's basically it's a story of young Americans enjoying each other a great deal.
Yes. And lots of bodily fluids. And a good time was had by all. It certainly was by me.
Okay.
Multiple times.
All right.
We'll get to that in another show.
All right. Well, for now, let's wrap this one up. This has been a long one. It's going to be a bitch to edit, I think.
I think just leave it long. It's important. This is a history lesson, kids.
So let's wrap it up with a little bit of Rita Coolidge singing All Time High. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
All I wanted was a sweet distraction for an hour or two. Had no intention to do the things we've done. Funny how it always goes with love. When you don't look, you find. But then we're two of a kind. We move as one. We're an all-time high.
What's wrong with you, man? Get the other record.